Welcome to webinar 3 of the Censinet AI series, Defending Patient Safety in the Age of AI, Resilience in a Complex Multi-Layered Health Ecosystem. Say that 3 times, Eric.
Please no, please no, please no.
And I am pleased to be joined today by Erik Decker, the VP and CISO at Intermountain Health, the former chair of the HSCC Cyber Working Group, and the individual who knows more about this probably than many people, this topic. So we are going to dive right in. But before we do, just a reminder, we're doing 7 of these sessions. This is one of them. This is one of 3, or this is 3 of 7. And but there are 6 other sessions that are available, some on demand at this point, and then others that will be coming shortly. We have another one this week on Thursday with Will Conaway. We have 2 next week they'll be pretty exciting to learn more about the rural challenges that folks are facing with AI adoption. And then we're going to get a little technical on Wednesday with Josh Corman. We're going to talk about the AI kill chain. I know that's one of your favorite topics, Eric. And
Yep,
then,
that's a good one.
it's a good one. And then the following week, we get into it with Steve Wilson again. We had him on the first round of these in January, where he talked about the OWASP for top 10 for LLMs. Now we're going to do it on the agent side. So really excited about the remainder. Excited about today. Let's get right into it. Now, Eric, you wrote a paper about this in Harvard Business Review.
I did.
When was that?
Yes.
That was a while ago.
It was the year of Change Healthcare. And after we had all sort of the fallout of that had finally come to a conclusion, I was asked with Janet Gupta and Glasser to co-write and author, sort of like what happened here, like how did Change Healthcare happen? What has been occurring? What are the ramifications of an ecosystem and systemic risk? Very cool opportunity. These are like weird things that you never expect to be able to just do, out of the
Yeah.
blue. So we went through a very, very thoughtful process, but also a very accelerated process of trying to figure out like how to scope it. So yeah, there's a Harvard Business Review. It's essentially called, I think, "Preventing the Next Change Healthcare Attack" is the title.
Yeah, and I remember that came out, I think we were all at Vive, and I remember
Mhm.
talking to a few CISOs, and they were like, "Phew, wow, we're all good. We weren't
Yeah,
using that product." And then like two
yeah,
days later, they were like, "Oh my God, we were using the product under another name." And I think many folks don't realize, but one of the biggest risks was the cash on hand for a lot of health systems to
yeah.
weather this storm.
So it was interesting. You talk about Vive. Maybe I can tell my story a little bit.
Yeah.
When it happened, I mean, I know who Change Healthcare was. I mean, I knew they were a clearinghouse. I knew they were involved in this, um, and I think this is really exemplary of how third-party risk programs and what we've been doing for the last 20 years is not covering the bases by what we should be doing. Because in my own personal journey, and I'm just sort of outing myself here a little bit, I thought like, oh, Change Healthcare, they just got hit with a ransomware attack. That sucks for them. And then I went on my merry day. This is 2 o'clock in the afternoon on February 21st. I'll always remember this. And then hours later, we started getting, the impacts of this, coming through our revenue cycle. And I didn't draw the connection. There was like, revenue cycle was disrupted. There were issues that were happening. I was like, oh, some outage or something like that is going on. And I was in the calls, I was listening, and I was still doing my work. And then it finally dawned on me, like it was 3 hours after the event had taken place. Oh, this is the whole system just got shocked. Like the whole industry is now in a state of complete shock.
Mm.
We need to like we stopped all of our standard MI stuff. I said, time out, guys. Like we need to go into large scale insert response mode right now. Give me 15 minutes, and then we went back and formed our incident, leveraged our incident plans, our incident response plans, which everybody should have, right? For how we handle these massive events. Got our commander figured out, and then came back in, and then we started going through the process. But what was embarrassing to me, and this is actually I think Vive was a few days after this had happened. We were in the midst of it. What was embarrassing to me was I had no idea. Like, it was that critical to my company. And I just sat back and I thought, and I remember, Ed, you and I were joking a little bit because ChatGPT was already out. We were able to make images. We were playing with that a little bit. And I had created an image about contemplating this whole third-party ecosystem. I will say this happened before change. I have this image that I'll forever keep, which is risk assessors with clipboards screaming and yelling at each other, as they watch the city around them burn. I was like, is this not what we're doing with third-party risk? We're just like putting clipboards at one another, fighting each other with questions and answers, but we're not getting to real truth, and we're not getting to real understanding. And then change happened. And it was like, here it is. We didn't understand like how important this was to the whole ecosystem. And then I actually went around, I was talking with other CISOs at Vive, and I said, did you guys know? And to a T, nobody had a clue. Nobody's like program said material vendor, material supplier. Right. We have to have resiliency plans in place for inevitably when this thing goes down. What are we going to do about it? So it was a huge wake up call for our whole industry, and like realizing that this is actually in our face.
And now we have AI on top of it. And AI was out earlier, obviously before change happened, but now the acceleration of adoption really raises the stakes around the industry for us to really get our arms around systemic risk and understanding our critical functions as it relates to our own business, but also the scope of the industry and what are the critical functions that can shut down the industry.
Yes. Yeah. And I think with AI, it's, again, I know we're going to get into details here, so I won't dive into later discussions yet, but the way I'm thinking about this is there's an accelerant capacity with AI, an accelerant both in the ability for attacks to happen, which I know you're going to talk about in later webinars, an accelerant in knowledge and understanding of the actual ecosystem itself. So if you now, whereas before, so what we're talking about is market saturation, concentration risk, and then where the biggest entities exist, that you can bust the bubble and cause this ripple effect across the whole of the ecosystem. Before, that might have been a lot harder to get to the answer of like where those market concentrations exist, although frankly, the data is out there, so smart people could figure it out. Well, now AI just makes that more accessible. So everything with AI is generative AI, and these chat systems are allowing the level of sophistication to knowledge. It's lowering that ability to get to real knowledge. Now, we can get all the debates about like accuracy and is it valid, is it ethical, et cetera. That's not this topic, but there's a lot of other stuff there. So I think that will definitely, everything with AI is going to be turning into an acceleration, is really what it boils down to.
Exactly. And I think the other thing that you uncovered was the complexity of these relationships amongst vendors as well.
Yeah.
Within certain transactions.
Yes. So think of like if you can picture in your mind a neural network, where you've got nodes and lines connected to nodes, and it's multidimensional. Some of the nodes are small, some of the nodes are big, and some of the nodes have many connections running into them, and they become concentration points, and some of them are very small and have connections elsewhere. So our ecosystem of healthcare operates that way. Inside of a hospital, by and large, we are no longer operating just within the four walls of the hospital. Right. But we are reliant upon services connected into it in an operational transactional capacity in order for us to be able to run our digital operations at the scale that we have to operate at. it's actually, we always say, we can always go fall back to paper during downtimes and business continuity actions and so forth. That can work for a few hours, but and it's accelerating. Like that graph is going up more and more and more, where the reliance upon the digital workloads is so incredibly important for our ability to care for people that when they go down, it causes that much more impact when it occurs. As AI gets introduced into the world and
Mm.
into our workloads, today it's not embedded in our transactional ecosystem. Literally in a month from now, it could be. And where today it's not, like, we don't need it. Think about like ambient listening, clinical note taking, et cetera. Like, oh, getting people to adopt that. And as they go on that journey and then they do adopt it, and it saves, our physicians 4 hours of work, a week, on and pajama time issues, like that suddenly becomes a necessity. It went from a nice thing to core to my operations. And when that layer is now gone because of a disruption of that technology stack, it becomes that much more of a cascading problem. And then take that and extrapolate it into an ecosystem where these services are actually being delivered by other companies and other entities, and they could be third, fourth, fifth, or sixth party away from you. You're now in a state of potentially not even being able to know where all of that comes in, at least from a supply chain contract management kind of perspective. You would certainly know from a services perspective where it comes in. But your entire mindset has to shift now to all right. Let's stop thinking about this from the sense of what is the vendor doing and how viable is the vendor and how viable is the service and product the vendor is giving us, to what is the critical function that we have to operate on, what underpins that critical function, where does that exist inside this entire ecosystem, what do I control versus what do others control, and at what point is there a choke point in that system.
Hmm.
And where there is a choke point, which every system has a choke point, so choke points aren't bad. It's actually important to know the choke point, because when you know the choke point and you know where that failure point can occur, you can build management plans around it, and you can
Hmm.
build and contemplate, what are we going to do when this thing goes down. And I notice I say not if. We always say it's if, not when, or sorry, when, not if. And so we need to act that way. Our risk management plans need to be contemplating and acting as, when this goes down and this critical material function is now offline, activate the plan, accordingly to that. And that practicality and it is a bit deep, inside your operational sort of business continuity planning, but it's actually where the rubber meets the road, and it's actually what matters, when it comes down to these big disruptive issues.
Yeah, and as you said, the stakes are higher now. This isn't just about security breaches. This is about life or death, right?
Yeah.
Situations. And we've proved that a couple of years ago with AI. The stakes are just getting higher and higher, and much more complex. And I think it's really interesting what you said about the earlier neural network and the relationship with those nodes. Can you talk more about as you think about where investments are going, as you think about where third-party risk is going, what are some of
Yeah.
the things you're looking at?
Yeah. So, we're trying to take on this challenge of, so we've got 20 years of established history and established best practice of third party risk. Is, you've got a supply chain contract that comes in, there's going to be a new provider, you're going to kick the tires, you're going to ask these questions, you're going to go through the understanding of, is the vendor viable, is the product viable, are there any issues associated to it, find out the issues, build an action plan, hand it off to the deployment teams, wipe your hands of it, rinse and repeat, and move on. Um, and you get the checkbox of, yep, security blessed it, yay, everybody's happy. But of course, there's all these issues that were identified that need to be corrected. And how many of us stop there?
Right.
Where like the issues were identified, but the next step, the most important part of that step is, how are we correcting those problems, and so forth.
Mhm.
So we've gotten ourselves into this mindset of like we must look at every single vendor because every single vendor could be a risk point, and because it could come in from anywhere, we're thinking that the entire world must be managed accordingly. We must look at everything, and that is how the scale has to operate. So I'm challenging our teams to say I want to flip the script. I don't want 80% of our work working on risk assessment. Don't get me wrong, risk assessment is important.
Mhm.
I want 80% of our work on risk management.
Mhm.
When we identify the problems, how are we resolving those problems? Well, in the realm of things that we control, that we can do and we can take action on, and not
Mhm.
be reliant on somebody else to do a thing, are we doing those things?
Right.
So now, at the same token, you don't like the 20% of risk assessment, you don't want to miss something huge and allow like a massive catastrophic risk to enter our environment. So what's the mindset? Like, how do we think about it? Well, we know, think like a threat actor and think like how all this stuff plays out. We know how the threat actors operate. We know how they break in. We know their vectors of access. So from a third party perspective, it's about either the service that they're providing us is material to our business and might not be connected to us at all, but we need something from them.
Mhm.
Materiality is a defined term that you need to like work through with your company to figure out like what are those thresholds, or the vendor is connected to you in some way where if they get whacked, they can ride over and come to you, which they do. Bad actors do that. That is one of the three ways they break into organizations. And so then what you're looking at are the connectivity types that you have with the vendor. And is it a risky connection or is it a safe connection? Risky connections are things like full-blown VPN site-to-site tunnels with like network connections back and forth with one another. It could be administrative access that they have. They can log into your systems on any time that they would like to without any sort of checks and balances associated to it. Whereas safer connections are, service-oriented architectures, APIs. You've got, private keys, key management, things in place where the scope associated to how that connection between the two really can't be jumped. That you can't make that jump, over
Mhm.
over to it.
And to have
So
that
yeah,
lens to prioritize what's important, like you said,
yeah.
versus focusing on everything or trying to focus on everything.
Yeah, so the assessment methodology is an intrinsic inherent risk is really what it boils down to. How can this company cause impact to me? Is it material to my business operations? Are they a connection point into my operations? If those two things are yes, then we need to be looking at it. We need to understand the depth of it. If they're no, basic level assessments are fine with me. Like we should not be getting into 500 questions on this. Like the inherent nature of the risk is minimal.
Right.
Stop exerting resources to figure out and chase something that's not that important.
Exactly.
That's my strategy.
Yeah. All right. So we developed this smart framework and toolkit. We release it as part of the HSCC. Just at a very high level, talk about what's in that.
Yeah, so the smart toolkit, this is really, really awesome. And I hope everybody, you have a homework assignment, you have to go off to the Sector Coordinating Council's website. It's healthsectorcouncil.org. There are 17 critical functions that have been mapped out for the healthcare ecosystem. So we have taken what are material to the operations of healthcare in our country.
Hmm.
So material, what are those things? Critical functions, what does that mean?
Hmm.
It means, I'm going to give you some examples. It means imaging. So when you show up and present inside an ED and you've got symptoms of stroke, the difference between do you have a bleed in your brain or a block in your brain is an image. And that image has to happen very quickly in order to know how you're going to intervene and and save the patient that's in the middle of that stroke. So imaging is actually critical for acute patient care purposes, which is something that we as a society all rely on. We need these EDs to be operating. We need trauma to be operating. So you've got imaging that's there. You've got lab that needs to be there. You've got medication management that has to happen. So those are three critical functions. Claims and remits, like that's the Change Healthcare piece. That's a critical
Mhm.
function. Another example. Pharmaceutical, retail pharmacy. So you get a prescription when you show up at the pharmacy to get that prescription. There's a whole transactional ecosystem that entire order flows through that not only hits the company, your healthcare company, to the pharmacy, but it's going through aggregators, it's going through clearinghouses, it's going through PBMs, and it's going through your health plan, all before it hits your Walgreens, your CVS pharmacy, where they say, yeah, your copay is $10 or whatever that thing is. And if any part of that system is down, then that can't happen.
Right.
So what we did was we actually mapped out what are those relationships? How does that chain together in a transactional capacity? And when you understand, then now when you start framing your reference around risk of the critical function, now I can take that back to my company and say, well, what does imaging look like for me? What does dialysis look like for my company? How do I interact inside this ecosystem, the national healthcare
Mhm.
ecosystem, as it relates to this chain capacity? And where are my suppliers in this mix? And now, once I understand what's material to my company, the functions material and the vendor is material, I can now start understanding what am I going to do about it when this
Right.
thing ultimately breaks. And you can start having that planning conversation with your business partners and your clinical leaders and start walking them through that. Some of you
Yeah, and
might think,
this is a
good,
nice slide that kind of defines
yeah,
a methodology that you could use to do that.
exactly. And sounds a lot like business impact analysis
Hmm.
because it is.
That's right.
And that's fine. Like that, like those are great. That's what we should have been doing this whole time. But
BIA is back.
it's right. But it's focused. It's
Hmm.
focused on helping people understand a framework of how to. It's deconstructing this incredibly complicated ecosystem of healthcare that we all live in. And if we all have to invent that ourselves, then it gets messy. So we them maps because it's going to help you map out that process, and map out that BIA and give you the focus of getting to the reality and the point of like where these nodes are that are important.
That's right. And if you don't do it, bad things can happen. We've already seen it with Change Health.
Yeah.
Um, Anything on this slide you want to point out? I think what is interesting for me is there's obviously cybersecurity attributes that we want to obviously measure and manage, but there's also contractual legal ones. So the
Mm-hmm.
interesting thing about change was there were exclusivity clauses which prevented us to actually build a continuity plan to have an alternative identified in the event of a change health issue.
Yes, because we capitalism did what capitalism did.
That's right.
Right? I mean,
That's right.
these are like we're advantageous contracting and all of that kind of stuff. There's no regulation that says you must have multiple suppliers through a clearinghouse or any of that kind of stuff. So, of course, organic contracting became what it became, because we, again, hadn't contemplated how important this was to the national utility that we're all connected into. Um, this is something I also like to say. I don't know if it's popular or unpopular, or if it's alarming or not, but I actually truly believe it. When you're dealing with a smart map, a smart scenario, the contract doesn't matter. The contract is not it is not a risk management um, action. We always talk about what can you do from a risk perspective. You can mitigate it, you can avoid it, you can accept it,
Mm.
you can transfer it. You cannot transfer it, because what a contract gets you is the ability to ultimately, state a claim and get reimbursement or whatever on the long tail. It takes years to go through all of that. If you're hit and you're impacted by something, if the vendor violates its obligations to you, and it must be adjudicated in the
Hmm.
middle of a life safety event, that doesn't matter at all.
That's right.
So you actually own that risk. you have not transferred that risk to the third party, which is it's a fallacy when people think that way.
Mhm.
So this is where like that contemplation of, if I understand that they're material to my business operation, they're material to my critical function, we have to be contemplating what we're going to do when this goes down. Had we done this with change before it happened, we would have had in place redundancy, and we would have been able to switch over to that secondary clearinghouse within a day easily,
Yeah,
because we had already done everything. Instead, we had to build that on the fly as we were trying to figure out what was actually happening, and we were all guessing how
that's
long is
right.
this going to be out, what's going to happen, and so forth. And so there was this drag, this weight that had happened,
Yeah.
and weeks went by. And some companies went out of business because cash flow came to a screeching halt.
Yeah, in fact, United Healthcare had to basically support folks financially for weeks to get
And
them
some
through the
would say
process.
that financial help was actually not even close to what was actually necessary.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
All right, so let's take a look at some of those critical functions you mentioned earlier. These are the 17. We're going to unpack a couple of those. Anything you want to point out about any of these that exist here?
Yeah, I mean, I of course, if you can imagine, like I'm a CISO for a large integrated delivery network. You know, Intermountain, we're 6 states in the Mountain West region.
Mhm.
We have 33 hospitals. We cover 1 million lives with our health plan. Um, 70,000 employees. Just, you know, and within Utah, I think we cover like 55-60% of the care. So my brain always goes to people's wellness, safety, and livelihood when it comes to these things, because we're directly connected to it. So the ones that pop for me specifically are about acute and vulnerable patients. Like what are the critical functions that get to the timeliness of care, and what are those things that we absolutely must be ready for, because when it goes down, like the clock starts. So you're going to get to stuff like blood plasma, radiology, diagnostic for sure, therapeutic, maybe a fast follow. When you get to stuff like aggressive cancers and things where you need to be treating that cancer on a regular occurrence. Um, Imaging, well, imaging is radiology, sorry, lab and dialysis. You know,
Mm.
because dialysis is again kind of a longer side of that, because you can go a few days without needing it, but you absolutely need to be able to get there.
Yeah, and we've already had a blood issue. We've already had a blood incident.
Yes, we have.
I mean, it was isolated on the East Coast, but still, it was pretty impactful.
I mean, yeah, I would actually say it wasn't even just isolated the East Coast. It was every hospital was figuring out how to manage a short supply of blood, you know,
Mm.
and making changes when that occurred. So another example of cascading failures where that can impact your organizations.
All right, let's unpack one of the or two of these actually. So we have the claims and payment.
Yeah.
Um,
So this is you're going to look at this, you're going to see like it's probably not going to make a lot of sense yet because the context isn't in there. We do this on purpose. This is actually what the map looks like. The context, we have a TLP red version of this that you can get from the Health Sector Council that will show you sort of what we know about the current ecosystem in this space. That will really be illuminating for you. But if you think about looking at this on the right side, so this is claims and payments. This is the revenue cycle part of the process. Is Change Healthcare. The right side, if you go to the bottom right IT system, that's going to be your systems, your EMR, your revenue cycle systems that are collecting all of that. It's going to send it up the chain to an entity. That entity is going to send it to the left, which is where the left side is where the plans and payers are. And in the middle, these third-party services are your clearinghouses. So it all funnels through this. And there are 3 clearinghouses that own the lion's share, like 90% of the entire market. So if one of those goes down, cascading failure, transactional nature is broken. That's what happened with Change. And then, of course, you go back from on the left side, the plans and payers, they either, they accept the claim, they submit the remit, the remit comes back over, and that cash comes into the hands of the delivery system, and away you go. In the the contextual version of this map with, if you are an owner and operator, you can ask for it and you can get that. You'll start to see like, what are the relationships here? In fact, like right below entity, you've got three IT systems on the right side. There are third-party services that are providing those aggregation layers. And those are entities that are in the middle of that transactional nature, that transactional ecosystem that you probably should look at. Same with
Retail.
retail pharmacy. So
Mm.
similar construct. So you've got on the far right side, you've got the patient. Patient presents, to their physician. Physician at the entity. That's the delivery side on the right. Goes up into an IT system, EMR, like your Cerners, your Epics, whatever, Meditechs. That order is submitted and passed up through to a pharmacy, clearinghouse, gateways, etc. That switches on over into a pharmacy benefits manager that figures out the formulary associated to it. Is it in the plan? Is it not in the plan? That hits, going to the left, it hits the health plan and payer, where it confirms what's in network, what's out of network, how does that all work? And then it flows right back to the pharmacy again through, it's bi-directional. And then that's how you actually pick up your medication. So there are at least, what am I counting here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 nodes that transaction flows through for that to work. And if you disrupt a node and the nodes don't have redundancy around them or resilience around them, the transaction breaks.
All right. So we talked a little bit about this, but talk about how important it is now as we think about risk management to include, like, remove the silos that we've created over the last couple decades, right? Where cyber risk management's in one silo and continuity's in another silo. We've got to bring these things together now.
Yeah. Yeah. So and I think this is kind of where my mindset is, and as a CISO, all of these functions are within my purview, so like I don't see distinctions between them, but the teams that make up these different operational capacities, it's easy for them to get into an operational mode where they do their thing and they do their thing, and it's hard to kind of connect the dots.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, risk management is literally about continuity and resilience. Like, that's the point. Like you're figuring out, what are the issues, how do we drive these issues down to an acceptable level of risk and tolerance, and the strategies associated to that are, eliminating the problems, building, resiliency plans around the problems, redundancies around the problems, etc. So it all ultimately connects the dots under a larger risk management vision. And continuity planning and exercising is one of the tactics to use for the elimination of risk. Well, actually, not the eliminate, the lowering of risk. It's not elimination. Into a level of acceptance to know that you can actually manage the situation if it actually materializes itself. So it's part of that risk reduction strategy, continuity planning.
Yeah, you've got to validate those recovery times,
Yes.
so that you have high confidence that if you do, when you do get hit, you can recover based on what you set out.
Yeah. And like I'm not a big proponent. I'm trying to get my brain there, but not a huge proponent of risk quantification models,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like they're throwing a lot of math and algorithms at a problem that doesn't connect the dot to the operational reality that you live in. We can throw a number at something and say, oh, I'm below the number, so our risk is accepted. But is that really true, to the operational reality of the situation that you're in? I think the better way to get to risk tolerance and acceptance is to contemplate a problem, exercise the problem, reduce the issues after the exercises, and then continue to exercise until, like, it's like a professional sports team, right? You
Yeah.
practice and drill all the time until you're capable of handling any situation that happens at game time. You can call the audible and you can go, and your muscle memory is what drives you versus like the plan that's on a shelf somewhere. And that is like a scenario based acceptance of risk and understanding, getting that down to a level that you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, I would posit that risk quantification, and I agree with you about your concerns with it. We've talked about this before, but
Mm-hmm.
it's been there really to help prioritize
Yes.
focus investments, right? Time, people, etc. I think a better approach is critical functions as a focus. Like
Yeah.
look at your business processes, focus on the ones that matter, put the time and effort into them. Don't even bother about risk quantification there. And
Right.
then for everything else, you can put a layer if you want. If you want to put a layer of risk quantification over it, you can do that if you need
Yeah.
to do that. But I think it provides this false sense of security that, quite frankly, people get breached. They have incidents, whether or not they use quantification.
I completely agree. In fact, where I think quantification can be helpful is, and who I think are actually very good at it, are your cyber insurance
Banks too.
underwriters and,
Yeah, and
and
the
and
banks. Yeah,
and the banks. Yeah,
yeah,
because you got actuaries who are looking at large models, and they can measure where they feel you are based on your defensive posture and where the rest of the markets are, and that can help guide how well are we doing. What does like large scale investment look like? But when it comes down to discrete risk elements, I think we end up playing fantasy games if when we
yeah.
get into these risk quant models, because it's arbitrary, like how you define it.
Agree. Yeah, in banking and finance, I'm sorry, it's less complex than
Yeah.
healthcare. All right. Let's break out into the AI world again, go back into AI, system failures, continuity gaps. What are you doing here? How are you thinking about this in the context of your overall program?
It is becoming the new control plane.
Hmm.
So the way I think about disruption and resilience is it always starts with what is the threat actor, or sorry, who is the threat actor and what is their motivation? And then how do they do what they do? What are their tactics? Josh Corman's webinar, I'm sure, will be awesome because he thinks this way. He's like an expert in this field, so you should watch that. Um, the and the reason why I think that way is because that helps provide you the focus of where do you go with your defenses and how do you stay ahead of where the threat actors are moving, and keeping your business safe and functional. If you try to envision how to protect against every scenario, you will be overwhelmed and you will fail. So so we know how they operate. We know how the threat actors generally operate. It's they social engineering. It's vulnerabilities exploited directly from the internet. It's third parties connected to you through a risky connection. And we know that once they get inside, that's just the beginning. There are other things. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure anybody on here would be like, well, what about the supply chain attack where they like drop like malware inside of a software package? Yeah, yep, you're right. That absolutely exists. At the end of the day, those are beachhead attacks that end when the motivation is large scale disruption. Let's clarify that. Um, the attack is against IT and IT's control plane. And IT's control plane, generally speaking, is Active Directory or those like large, massive asset management systems that have full administrative access all over the place. If they can get into the layer of access to every asset in your environment, then they can cause disruption. That just happened in a recent issue that you've been all. I won't name the name of the company, but that was exactly the attack. Call it a wiper attack or a ransomware attack. It's all the same. It all goes to privileges of the highest privileges and getting to those highest privileges and then causing the damage. So that's the attack today. Tomorrow, when AI is managing the workloads throughout our entire environment, and now you can get AI to do things for you, the control plane is still there on the IT platform side, but now it's also going to be in the AI layer. And so if you can co-opt the workers to cause damage because they have access to do all kinds of stuff, now I have a whole new pathway where I can wreak havoc. And as we connect these workers into these privileged accesses, we have to be thinking about this. This is what I'm thinking
Yeah.
about. This is what
Yeah.
I'm nervous about. And building security by design, baked in by default.
Yeah, the architects of HIPAA, I know don't get a lot of credit as things have moved along, and we certainly have to look at it given what modern security and continuity looks like today. However, if you think about it, CIA is brilliant. Confidentiality was really the
Mm-hmm.
focus of the last couple decades. Then it
Mm-hmm.
moved to availability with ransomware, and now this is all about integrity. This is all about the
Mm-hmm.
integrity of the data and the attacks on the integrity at a scale now that I don't think any of us thought possible.
Yeah. Um, yeah, where I would say that the AI control plane attack that I just talked about is still availability, but could easily become an integrity attack. I agree with that. As more and more access is drawn into the data platforms themselves and the data that's inside the platforms themselves, and how you
Mm.
can trust the data that's inside those platforms. And we haven't quite yet seen that, but it's
Not
coming.
yet. It's coming, no
Yeah, it's
question.
it's once it becomes economically viable for the criminal organizations to run that kind of attack, they will do
Yeah. Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and it won't be ransom. It'll be like ransom.
It's
Hey,
extortion.
we have an
Yeah.
integrity attack on your system. We're not telling
Hmm.
you where, but
Yep.
you need to give us ransom. You need to pay the
Yep.
ransom or we're going to exploit it. All right,
Yep.
or activate it. All right, resilience by design. We're kind of running short on time, but I think here again, you mentioned it. Resilience, continuity. That's the new focus. That's where people need to be shifting their resources, their people, their investments, etc.
Yeah, and I think we have a slide later. Like I've got two OKRs from Intermountain that I think we shared here. And in my mind, like what does resilience mean? It means that the business is has exercised and is capable of meeting recovery objectives within
Mhm.
shorter time windows than the average outage that's happening. And if this is how I talk to our executive leaderships about this, which is, we always say it's if not when. So when it happens, we will win if we get our stuff back up within 5 days. If we can manage acute and vulnerable patient care within 5 days and not go on diversion, not cause a damaging widespread impact against every other health
Mm.
system around us, we beat the attacker. The winning scenario is not that we never got hit. It's that we recovered well and quickly and succinctly and correctly.
And here it is.
There it is. And so mind you, like you've got two facets of this. You've got the sort of the internal facet, which I'm going to put on the left side, which is recovering from prolonged large scale cyber incidents. Those systems, those critical systems and workloads, 5 days. But you've also got the supplier side, which is the right side of this. Again, like we go back to the suppliers can be in the middle of a critical function and that critical service window. And so it still is with those material suppliers, they have the same 5 day clock. It's not like, oh, I control the system, so it's a different clock. It's the same clock because it's the same process. It's the same clinical workflow.
Excellent. All right, let's move on here. How do you think about, we talked a lot about systemic risks, the programs under cyber across through continuity and resiliency. How do you work in governance, and how are you operationally applying your governance structure to AI? Do you have a separate governance committee? Do you include it in your current process?
Yeah, we have a few things. So, from a general risk and cyber and privacy perspective, we have an executive committee that governs all privacy and cyber risk, which some AI things can make its way into that committee when it relates to a cyber or privacy problem. And so they've got charters and authority and decision rights as far as like and risk acceptance and tolerance obligation in order to sort of manage that. And we also have AI governance, of course, like everybody's hopefully doing this now, where we're looking at 7 different principles of responsible use of AI. And so you've got, of course, you got privacy and security that's in there. You've got ethical use of it, transparent nature of it, safety use of it, and so forth. That covers all facets of AI at Intermountain. And then there are specific elements, like when you get into clinical use of AI, we're following the methodology, which I really love this, kind of like the same concept of a clinical trial, same process, where in clinical trials, you have 3 phases before you understand that a drug can go to market or an intervention can go to market. It starts with a safety layer, first phase. Is it safe? It's small. Is it safe to use, practical, etc.? The second layer is an efficacy layer. Is it actually worthwhile? And then the third layer is a scale layer. Can you scale it up to be deployed and leveraged? And if you can meet all 3 of those, and you have robust clinical validation that's happening as a result of all of that, you can do this in a safe way. And I think it's an amazing process. The people who came up with this, I'm just like awe-inspired by
That's a
them.
great model. Yeah, that's a really
Yeah.
interesting model.
And so like that's in there. So I know we just got a question from Ann. I'll just answer it right now. How you incorporate ethics with use. So that is our AI governing committee is looking at those factors for ethical use, et cetera. And when it comes into these the clinical use, or we have we call them pulse teams that are like there's a clinical function, there's a business function, there's a marketing function, there's et cetera. They all sort of drive deep into the use of the model itself, and is it meeting these ethical criteriums and so forth. So there's a framework that this is all getting judged against, and it is a multidisciplinary process that evaluates that. It is not cybersecurity by themselves in a back room somewhere saying this is an ethical model and this one is not an ethical model.
And just to be clear, that framework existed prior to AI.
Well, the AI one, and specifically, we actually put in place because of it.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, the clinical trials framework has existed for a long time. I mean,
Sure.
that's
Yeah.
how we. Yeah, but we just sort of adopted that into the use of it. AI was the injection of new features that required fundamentally. This is the reason why. Fundamentally, with other previous versions of AI, like machine learning, et cetera, the algorithm was known and
Right.
it is repeatable. You input, output, you can validate, you know exactly what's going to happen, and you can make sure that it's accurate and correct because you can control the algorithm. Generative AI, you have no idea.
Non-deterministic.
Non-deterministic. All you know is there's an input and there's an output, and it's not going to be the same every single time. And so you've got to go about this in a different way of validating that these models are correct and accurate and so forth. So you need this like other layer over
What I
top.
like about it is very general. And when quantum comes out, commercially, you can apply it now. The model
Yeah,
can be applied. So
absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
it's really brilliant. All right, so let's move on. We talked a little bit about this. I'm gonna skip investment priorities for healthcare CISOs. You've already said to people, you challenge them, get a hold of the SMART framework, adopt it,
Yeah.
start to report on it. Do you report on this as well?
I talk about, yes, I talk about our the number of material suppliers that we have. So we have that now. We've gone
Mhm.
through the smart model and mapped out with our business partners doing the BIA and said, okay, here's what dialysis looks like. Went to nephrology department and said, what does this mean to you? And we got all these insights, from them. It sparked this entire conversation. And then once we understood the 3 pathways specifically around dialysis and nephrology and what's important, we're then able to back into what are the systems that support all of that, or the third parties that are involved in all of that. And then we tag these things as material. And then once we understand it's material, now we go through the next process, which is the business continuity planning, risk management planning around the inevitable failure of that material supplier. And so that is what's driving the conversation. So I've got specific metrics about like, well, how many suppliers have we identified? How many plans have we gone through? Um, we're just on our journey here. We're just starting. So like,
Right.
would I say that our plans are perfect? No. Would I say that they're validated to exactly what's going to happen? No.
Mhm.
Those will be opportunities for extra exercising and validation.
Mhm.
Intermountain, we did, the number is so high now. I keep forgetting it. It's either 25 or 26 tabletop exercises last year
Wow.
across the organization. And when you think about that, like what are we doing? We're actually going into these very deep transactional clinical processes, contemplating these scenarios and learning. It's almost like a workshop at this point, where we're helping these departments out with like, this is what's going to happen when all this occurs. This is like the wake up call to digitization and technology. And so what needs to be identified and what needs to be um, built, according to that exercise itself. And then this, of course, ties right back into the material supplier risk management pathways.
Eric, I lost you. My internet became unstable.
That was probably me.
No, no, it was on my end. So let me we're gonna move through this. We've got a couple of questions here. I'm gonna actually go to the questions from the live
Sure.
Q&A just because we're running out of time. Before I do, I just want to do just a couple housekeeping points here. There's a lot of resources available outside. We talked about the Smart Toolkit, which you can get from the Health Sector Council website. There's also additional publications on AI third-party risk management. There's one coming for AI governance. Obviously, you can reach out to Eric or connect with him on LinkedIn. And if you want to see the smart maps in action, uh, reach out to Censinet and we can take you through it within a software context. All right. And then for more information on resiliency programs and how you can build a resiliency program through automation, take a scan of the code and request a demo. We'd be happy to help you out. With that, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to go to the Q&A here, the chat. All right. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. Appreciate the insight. Do we know if an update to Smart is planned to include AI?
Not within the smart maps, because again, the smart maps are the mapping of how the transactional nature of healthcare operates. So it's like entity-based processing. It's not how the entity processes. But AI is very obviously important. So to answer that question, there's actually a new publication that just came out by the Sector Coordinating Council on AI. So you can go pick that up when you go off to the website. And there's other AI task groups that Ed that you're involved in. I don't know, maybe you should
Well,
pitch some of those.
there's a third party risk management task group. There's actually five.
Yeah.
We've published a glossary for AI terms. We have an AI third party risk management and supply chain transparency guide that's available. We have an AI governance guide that will be available shortly.
Mhm.
And there's a couple of one for secure design and development. And I forget what the fifth one is, but there's a fifth one as well.
Yeah.
So, but it's all on the HSCC website. Check it out.
Yeah.
And the group's doing amazing things.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Leave them early. Let's see. Challenge conductors. Talk about conducting exercises, and is there other ways to validate your recovery plan?
Um, yeah. So like I said, the exercising in general, I find people that when you first start to exercise, it's really more of an awareness issue to everybody else that's in the room that these are real issues, and it's like a wake up call kind of thing. And just like all the general adoption of new thinking, et cetera, requires you to sort of filter out the noise, in your lives and like make things reality. Like the first step of exercising is this is a reality check. it's very easy to kind of like wash through an exercise and be like, oh yeah, okay, IT recover everything and it's fine now, like, and just say that as like part of the exercise. Now, what do we do with continuity, et cetera? Think of it like double clicking in. Um, Once you get through the first layer of the awareness of all of this, you can double click into, well, let's take one part of the event, communication. That's always the one that's the hardest, and figure out like exactly how does that come in and play out. So what are your processes? What are your reliances? How does marketing work? What does email work? What's going to happen in the media, et cetera? And then start injecting and doing exercises around that, where you're literally war gaming out what's going to occur. Um, our military does this all the time. Like this is how they drill. This is how our sports teams do this all the time. We are contemplating different injects, different plays, and we are drilling and drilling and drilling and drilling and drilling until you know exactly how you're going to operate, so that when the action happens, your muscle is ready and you go. There's no questioning any of that.
Airports do it.
Yes,
All critical infrastructure groups do it. I
should do
mean,
it.
it should do it. Most do it. Nuclear
So
facilities do it.
yeah,
Um,
and it's not like that's why I say, like, we say once a year exercise is fine. That's industry standard,
mhm.
conventional wisdom, etc. Uh, can you really get muscle memory out of once a year? No.
Mhm.
What
So
you
you
get
did
is
26,
awareness.
you said last year?
Yeah, I think we're up in like we're planning 30s this year.
What do you are you continually learning things? Like, are there things you can share
Absolutely.
that you learned last year, from a summary perspective, like
Yeah.
that you didn't know, like when you hit, exercise 6 and all of a sudden you're at exercise 13. Well, again, I'm not.
Well, and again, like mind you, like what we're doing is we're getting into each of the departments
Mm,
and getting deeper into the departmental workflows. So a lot of these people, this is the first time they've ever seen it.
ah,
And so we're a big company, so like it takes a lot to get through that. And we've also exercised with our partners, our key partners. So you learn a bunch of that stuff. But what I'll say is this: like, we're Epic Shop, so we do Community Connect, and we have contemplated both sides of the exercise, where Intermountain gets hit with something, our Community Connect partner gets hit with something. And what are we going to do? What's the action going to be, et cetera? Well, then when actual events happen, you actually have that as the backdrop by
mm,
which you can work through the issue. And so, what is a stressful moment always, um, it is a little less stressful because you've already kind of
mm,
contemplated
yeah.
that work. So that is one of the hugest benefits. The human nature side of all
So
these
you're
issues.
you're stressing individual use cases and scenarios across specific business functions, which is why you
Yes.
get the 30 a
Yeah.
year. You're not doing it
Right.
30 times with the same
No.
context and same use case and same.
We not no not that not at that
Yeah,
level yet.
got it. That's great.
That's coming. Like I don't know
And
about 30, but
yeah, yeah. Now, what
I'll
about
annoy everybody if we do it. Like
how do you bring your third parties in? And have you done that yet? And
so with our material suppliers, yes, like the ones that are delivering core technology platforms and services. In fact, in some cases, they're the ones that want to do it
hmm
because of the interconnectivity with it. So just having that operational partnership with them. Again, I'm keeping names out of this because you got to be a little careful there.
Sure, sure.
Um, but like we all know the major technology, healthcare IT partners that we use, and everybody has a vested interest in understanding like what's going to happen when either side of this,
Right.
ends up with a situation.
Eric, thank you. This has been terrific. We're at time. How can people get in touch with you if they have further questions or?
LinkedIn is great. That's honestly the best pathway to me, and then I check it a lot. So happy to talk to you there.
All right. And folks, this will be available on demand as well. So we'll send out a notice. So slides will be available. Thank you very much for attending and have a great day.